So we do hear the term socialism today in the media. It's being thrown around again. What does the significance of the term mean today, given that the wall fell 20 years ago and that ideology is bankrupt?
Well, I mean, I think it has the same meaning. Socialism means that the government takes over the whole of the economy and basically directs the whole life of its citizens, which is what happened in all the Soviet bloc, I mean, in Russia and all its satellites, such as East Germany. And the reason people don't want that label attached to them, because it carries that whole meaning and the result of that whole practice, which was massive destruction and massive death throughout the Soviet bloc. But we nevertheless are drifting towards socialism. That is the crazy thing. It's discredited as an ideology and as a kind of moral crusade. And Obama and the whole left will go out of its way to say, no, this is not socialism. It's just government taking over businesses, government taking over healthcare, but it's not, it doesn't add up to anything. But it does add up. I mean, if you keep doing this, it does add up to something, which is a government takeover eventually of the whole economy and the whole country. And the reason it's happening is because even though it's discredited as a kind of moral political ideal, the underlying notions that socialism appealed to, such as you are your brother's keeper, you hear over and over again. I mean, when Marx said from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, that is just another way of saying you're your brother's keeper. And you hear almost every, on the left and the right, every US politician saying that's what you are. And so long as you believe the kinds of ideas that generated socialism, you're going to drift towards socialism, even if you say we don't want this.
Yeah, and there's an intellectual void in America today. So there's no socialism and there's no pro-capitalism. There's no, the ideologies behind those don't exist. So when you have a political void, then people are going to drift towards where, I mean, this would happen anyway, but they would drift towards their philosophy. Their implicit, unprincipled mishmash of a philosophy guides them. And one thing that the entire culture agrees on, the right and the left and the middle and the center and the independents, everybody agrees on altruism. Everybody agrees on this idea of you're your brother's keeper, the standard of morality is other people's well-being. So the politicians, you know, the politics drifts in that direction, even though there isn't a real ideology guiding it. Now, I think that a lot of the ideology that the left advocates is driven by a sense of egalitarianism, but even that is not a political philosophy. It's not like socialism. It's much more driven by hatred, by a negation than a positive. Remember, the socialists promised you a better life. Egalitarians don't promise you a better life, they just promise you equality, whatever the hell that means. So we truly live in a non-ideological age where we're drifting towards a statism, not because anybody's promising us a fascist utopia or a socialist utopia or some kind of other utopia, but just because we hate what we have, just because we hate the rich, just because we hate healthy people or people who are getting gold-plated medical insurance or whatever it happens to be, we're drifting towards a kind of a statist world.
Now, Ayn Rand grew up in communist Russia. It's another ism, communism. And she wrote a novel that was set in communist Russia, We the Living. What were her views on communism, and then how do communism, socialism, statism relate to one another?
Well, she was clearly anti-communist, but We the Living is a book, as she would say, I mean, as she said, the theme is about the individual versus the state, and it's when the state gains power at the expense of the individual and can trample on the individual, and it's a form of what she would call collectivism. It places power in the hands of a group at the expense of an individual, and it's a superficial variation. Whether it's communism and the group is labeled the proletariat, as it was in Russia, or if it's labeled the German race, as it was in Nazi Germany, and Nazi Germany meant National Socialism, or if it was labeled as a kind of the Japanese people symbolized by the emperor, who's a godlike figure. These are all variations of systems that place power in the hands of the group. And it defines the group differently, but the group is supreme, and the leaders, who are the representative of the proletariat, of the German race, Hitler viewed himself as the representative of this, of the emperor who's doing what he has to do for the Japanese people. They hold power, And the individual is dispensable and is up to giving his life for the sake of the state. And they had to give their lives, and that's what you saw in Germany, in Japan, and in Russia. And that's why they result in mass murder, because they regard the individual's life as completely unimportant and completely dispensable. And that is what Ayn Rand viewed as a complete abomination. And she was the greatest defender, I think, of the individual in the 20th century.
Yeah, I mean, communism is a form of socialism. In a sense, fascism is a form of socialism. That's why it's a Nazi Socialist Party. And they're all forms of collectivism, as Onkar stated. And the real enemy here is collectivism. And in the form in which he describes it in We the Living, collectivism take into that totalitarian, into a totalitarian system, into a totalitarian regime where every aspect of every individual's life is dictated by the state. We see, in a sense, softer collectivism, but softer collectivism always will drift towards this totalitarian notion. So the book is a critique of all collectivism, all statism, and certainly a critique of all forms of totalitarianism. And not only is the book excellent, but I'll take the opportunity to recommend the movie as well, which I think manages to convey that point really well and is the best movie of an Ayn Rand book made, and is available today on DVD.
And it's, one interesting thing and a real injustice towards Ayn Rand is she had trouble publishing We the Living. And she was told she doesn't understand Russia and she doesn't understand collectivism. And if you read the book, I think it gives you a very vivid portrait of what life was like in Soviet Russia at the time, set in the 20s basically. And it doesn't even go into the kinds of horrors, the gulags, the concentration camps in Nazi Germany that later come into existence both in Germany and Russia. But she was told, you don't understand, this is a great experiment going on. There was a lot of sympathy. This, again, I think is hard for young people to understand. There was a lot of sympathy for the communists and for what was happening in Russia, in America. And they viewed it in a really positive light. And here was Ayn Rand saying, look, you're killing people. This system kills people. And it kills the best within people. And they told her, you don't understand. Yet the 20th century has revealed that she's the one who understood what this meant. And its sympathizers are the guilty ones.
Well, it sounds like Monday, November 9th is an important day for people to remember all the lessons that the wall symbolized and its collapse represents. Thank you.
Thank you.